Hi, my name is Landon Refutation, and the claim I'm going to be refuting today is from Esmeralda, and states that Trump's rise in politics is the result of a spoiled and capitalistic institution or media. She supports her claim through pointing out the prevalence of sensationalism in media, the high amounts of free publicity Trump received through media outlets looking for viewers, and the fact that, aside from the popularity he gained from media, that he is no way qualified for presidency. The claim I'm going to be supporting, however, is that Trump's rise in the 2016 election is not a result of a capitalist media, but simply of a candidate of using an already faulty system of popularity that has long since been in both the media and in the voters themselves. This is proven through historical elections, the weakness of our election system, and a bit of human psychology. Elections have, since America's birth, simply been a popularity contest. Trump's rise in ranking is not a new phenomenon driven by capitalism, but simply a drastic example of what our political system allows. In the 1960 election, JFK versus Nixon, we were shown two things. The first thing we were shown is that popular vote does not exactly mean election. It does not matter nearly as much as one would think for election. Nixon had won the general election by a fairly large margin, but was utterly defeated in the Electoral College, which I'll mention more about later, by a fairly large lead. The second thing we were shown is that politics is trendy. This election held the first televised debate, and the influence it granted is apparent in who won, as JFK was noted to be charming and handsome, while Nixon was noted to be awkward and ugly on camera. This was far before television companies were substantially profiting from what they showed, meaning that this event simply drew viewers. Most people like politics because of its controversy and prevalence in our lives, not its actual impact. And ultimately, everybody likes to have an opinion on everything. This is because American democracy is simply not innately informed. The Founding Fathers realized this and developed the Electoral College specifically to counter it. Most use the term tyranny of the majority loosely, but American politics is a prime example of such. Humans themselves are the next broken piece of the system. We are naturally bored creatures, and as such, we look for controversy for ourselves for entertainment. Have you heard of the phrase, "It's like a car crash, you shouldn't look, but you can't help it"? The job of the media is to report on what the public wants. This is controversy. In this election, Trump is an extremely controversial subject and is the attention of most voters. This does not mean that everybody who watches Trump on the media will become a Trump supporter. This simply means that because of how ridiculous he will attract a crowd, and the media outlets use this to their advantage. Another stem of the human aspect comes from the people who actually do support Trump. He appeals to the fanatical and hateful part of US culture. While this is bad because we have a hateful part of our culture, this doesn't at all take away from the fact that these people like him, that they'll go out and vote for him on election day. This isn't the media making people change their minds to Trump just because he acted like an ass on the debates. It's simply Trump tapping into an unfortunately large amount of our population. They'll vote for him because he holds their views, not because he made bing bong noises in a rally. That being said, it's pretty obvious that most Trump supporters are not voting for him because of his intelligence or experience in foreign policy, but for his shock value and his promises. You know, if you're supporting Trump, chances are you're probably not somebody who takes rationalities into mind. Ultimately, Trump is simply attempting to abuse a system that has been here prior to the popularity of media. The man has a legitimate game plan for winning this election. He panders to those who are basically already guaranteed to vote for him and tries to stay controversial to the public to hopefully bring more. But don't be alarmed, it's not as bad as it currently seems. In the end, he still has to win the Electoral College vote, which actually has informed people, for the most part. Thank you.
All right, well, I know that this is our double down on this particular speech. We ended up having two speeches that responded to that for some reason because somebody helped themselves, I guess, to an extra outline. Not you guys, somebody else. The outline of the structure of the advocate's argument was laid out pretty clearly. I don't think that you spend a huge amount of time on a couple of those issues. Instead, you kind of have some counterclaims that are going to address those particular points. Your first point, though, does seem to respond to the argument about why the media is covering Trump the way they do. And I think that you do a nice job giving us an historical example in comparison to illustrate that particular point where new technologies have come in and have influenced what's going on. I was kind of surprised that you didn't talk about some of the ways in which voters are being reached nowadays. We had that discussion about free media in the other speech, for instance, and it seems like that might have been a very applicable subject on this first point that you're talking about. The idea that it's a popularity contest, I think, is a reasonable criticism of almost every democracy where people are going to take advantage of those sorts of things, and there are probably plenty of historical illustrations where that has in fact happened. And so the argument that this isn't really anything particularly different, and it's not the media that is creating this and exploiting it, but rather it's just the system that we happen to be in, I thought that that was a good counterclaim. The idea about what draws people to Trump in the first place, I think you've got a couple of good arguments here. You know, it's different, it's wacky and weird. It draws attention for those particular reasons. That there is a base of people that support his positions, I think that's pretty reasonable. Although I do think it's a little bit strange that there are a lot of people who support him despite the fact that his positions don't line up with their positions. I think there may be additional arguments here that don't have anything to do with some of the arguments that the advocate was talking about, but have to do again with the claim that you're making that somebody is exploiting the system the way it is. There's not really much discussion of the qualification issue, so that mostly apparently is going to be dismissed by you. And I think maybe there's a question about whether or not it is relevant to the question of why he has risen and become a popular figure. It may not matter that much. And we'll see when he either becomes president or doesn't what the outcome is going to be.